Hello everyone and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. In this video I want to share my reading experience of the first 3 books in the Red Rising series by Piers Brown. But first let me give you a small life update. In my latest video from July 12th I announced that I'd be taking a break from almost everything. I went on a long distance hike along the Dutch coastline and I intended to be away from home for about 4 weeks. But as usually, reality caught up with me. Starting on July 10, I found myself back home again on July 27. So I've been walking for about 2.5 weeks. During that time, I walked some 260 kilometers, which is 161 miles. I would have loved to continue walking on. My feet were doing okay, as well as the rest of me. But I found that as I entered more touristic areas of our Dutch coastline, it became increasingly hard to find available space on a campsite to put up my tent. It turned out that I had miscalculated, thinking that even during the busiest tourist season I would be able to find a spot on any campsite. Unfortunately, it is not allowed in our country to camp in the wild, so I was dependent on camping sites. On July 26, I was unable to find a place for the night. Everything was fully booked. I'd been walking about 26 kilometers that day and had run out of almost all of my options. Those that remained, like staying for one night in an expensive hotel room, supposing I'd find any of those available of course, didn't appeal to me at all. And I could be sure that things would get worse in the days up ahead. So very reluctantly I had to quit. All this time during my hike I did not read anything. In fact, I hardly even thought about reading. And even when I got back home, it took me about 2 days to get back into the groove of picking up a book and reading it. Now that I've adjusted back to my normal life again, I'm very hungry to read books again. Yeah! Before this hiking interlude, I read the first trilogy of the Red Rising series by Piers Brown. Let me run you through my experience of each of these books. The first book was a buddy read with my good friend BJ Minton, one of the most loyal followers of this channel. During our read we compared notes through email, and as with our previous buddy read, The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch, I was more positive than BJ. We started our read on the 5th of June and I finished reading Red Rising 7 days later on June 12th. After reading the first 6 chapters, BJ commented, "It's very readable, but sad so far." For my part, I experienced strong Orwellian 1984 vibes at the start of the book. "I can see the rest of this book," I commented. "Oppression, awareness, rebellion, war, freedom, or something along those lines." To this list, BJ added revenge. The writing itself I found merely functional and associative. It's nice, but not overwhelming as of yet. The reading was easy and I found the prose not very demanding. Some scenes were beautiful and touching. The fact that there wasn't much fireworks in the language department disappointed me somewhat. But the gripping story kept me eager to continue on reading. Around the 100-page mark, BJ remarked, "It's an okay book with an interesting story, but so far I don't see what all the raves are about. No particular scene stands out for me. I could stop reading it and never worry about Darrow again." As BJ is always reading 6 or 7 books simultaneously, I got a little ahead of him in our buddy read. Around 2/3 of the book, I mentioned how I was not very pleased with the turn of the story, which sort of became a story within a story. Overall, it's a mediocre book for me so far. Sort of adventure with a lot of violence and disregard for human life and suffering. Also, I started reading about this underdog who gets a unique chance of revenge or redemption, And all of a sudden I'm taken away from that story and find that I'm reading this sub-story about a war in a gaming situation meant to be part of his education. It is hard for me to invest in this sub-story even though it is entertaining. For BJ, mediocre was too nice a word, to which I added, "It's just not a very memorable book so far, but it is an introduction to something that may become memorable." At this 2/3 point, BJ said, "So far, the feel of the book is college-age fraternity shenanigans with extra violence." The final 100 pages of the book really drew me in. The story got a lot more interesting. Brown put in an extra layer to the story which really saves the book for me. The first sentence of the book gets so much meaning after you've finished it. "I would have lived in peace, but my enemies brought me war." I also love the line at the end of this short prologue. "Sharpened by hate, strengthened by love." This is a very violent story where the lowest caste in society, the Reds, lead extremely bleak, oppressed and prospectless lives. The hopelessness is pungently described in Narol, an uncle of our main character Darrow. His blinks are long and hard, as though it pains him to open his eyes each time and see the world again. Lack of justice is a big theme in this book, with rigged games and such. True excellence will not win in the end. I find that very beautifully illustrated when Darrow has to do a test that may give him an opportunity to escape his bleak life. Dancer, who performs the test, has 2 cards from which Darrow has to pick one. One has the picture of a reaper scythe and the other of a lamb, or so Dancer says. Pick the scythe and you lose. Pick the lamb and you win. Being hardened in the life of a lowly Red, Darrow has no illusions whatsoever that this is a fair game. The card he draws has a scythe on it. "I win," he says. When Dancer reaches for the card to see its face, Darrow shoves it in his mouth before he can take hold of it. At that point, Darrow pulls the remaining card from the bowl and tosses it at Dancer. A scythe. And then he says, "The lamb card simply looked too good not to eat." The prose is rather bland, but occasionally it touches some strings inside of me. Not because the language is exquisite, but because the moment that is portrayed is touching. I did come across one truly beautiful line. "It's amazing how quiet the world is as arrows sail, carrying death." The beauty lies in the word sail. There is a lot of mass psychology throughout the book, which was okay, although not particularly mind-blowing. That is one of the elements I found missing from this book, wisdom or special insights into the human condition. I would have expected more of this, given the themes of the story. It starts off with men are not born equal and democracy is regarded as one of the evils. Obviously, that way of regarding the world is what needs to be changed. Perhaps this is something the author will explore more in the next books. At the end, BJ finally found that Red Rising had become non-put-downable, with about 40 pages to go. Still, he finds that slugging through 65% of the book before it got good was way too much. And to him, the ending was frustrating, and not really an ending. Very true, which is why I immediately started reading Golden Sun, the second book in the series. To me, the ending was very satisfying. Without spoiling anything, Darrow's choice at the end opens up unimaginable possibilities. Amazingly good. Mainly thanks to the final 100 pages, I give Red Rising 82 points out of 100. I'm convinced of this writer's skills in telling a story, although he took his time in convincing me. I then read Golden Sun immediately afterwards. I started reading Golden Sun on June 14 and finished it on June 23. My respect for this author rose with each page. The pacing of the story is very fast. So much is happening in very few pages, and Pierce Brown is truly on a roll at times. By that, I mean that each sentence is a direct hit, a bullseye. For instance, during a conversation, two women try to convince Darrow that gold needs to feel pain. They are filled with retaliation, but Darrow says to one of them, "It's not about hurting them, Yves. It's about beating them. We're swinging at the apples when we should be digging at the roots. What will bombing them do? What will assassination accomplish? We need to undermine their society as a whole, erode their way of life, not this." Here every sentence is powerful and hits its mark. One of the most beautiful lines appears during a conversation between one of the Golds who has vowed to destroy Darrow. "You have everything, Carnus. Wealth, power, 7 brothers and sisters, a father and mother who love you. Yet you are here, drinking alone, killing my friends, setting the purpose of your life to ending me. Why? Because you wronged my family. No one wrongs the Bellona and lives. So it's pride. It's always pride. Pride is just a shout into the wind." He shakes his head, voice deepening. "I will die. You will die. We will all die, and the universe will carry on without care. All that we have is that shout in the wind, how we live, how we go, and how we stand before we fall." These kinds of passages are rare, so when they do occur, they stand out all the more. The story swept me off my feet at times, making Golden Sun a real page-turner. But every 10 pages or so, I stumble upon something I really do not like. But the next 10 pages are another exhibit of Brown's writing skills. It was a roller coaster ride for sure, where the emotion levels peak time and again on both sides of the spectrum. There are pages where I have to underline every line, and there are pages that I'd rather skip altogether. Beauty, emotion, boredom, uninteresting, exciting, breathtaking, terrible, tears, etc. There's too much betrayal and backstabbing. In fact, betrayal is what you come to expect. A trap is no surprise anymore, which is exactly the trap that the author sets for his readers. I'm referring to the ending of Morning Star, which of course I will not reveal in this video. The editors of Golden Sun, however, left one minor flaw in the text that I do want to mention here, if only so that it can be corrected in future prints. Darrow has a meeting with the Jackal. Victra, or Julie, has brought him to the meeting and she leaves the two men. On page 52 it says, "You're not staying?" I ask. "I showed you the door. You have to walk through it." She squeezes my butt playfully and sways out. The Jackal watches her leave. Then, 3 pages later, in the middle of the conversation, it says about the Jackal, "He shares a glance with Victra and leans forward." But Victra had left 3 pages ago, so unless she had secretly returned and taken a seat at their table, this is a mistake, which is confirmed on page 61 when both men talk about her in a way that makes it obvious that she is not present. It is of course a minor flaw, but it would be nice if it were corrected. As I said, conflicting feelings about these books. I rated Golden Sun with 84 out of 100, just a little bit better than Red Rising. After that, I immediately started reading Morning Star, the 3rd book in the series. I started it on June 23 and finished reading it on June 29. My experience with Morning Star is pretty much the same as with Golden Sun. I found it increasingly tiresome to read how our characters fall into one trap after the other. Nobody is to be trusted and there is backstabbing all over the place. Like the previous two in the series, Morning Star continues with this never-ending cycle of rebellion, traps, betrayal, etc. Every seemingly new chance is immediately repressed in the bud. On the other hand, next to all the war and violence, the story is captivating, and at times it is even beautiful, like the scene where one of the more lovable characters dies. There is even an occasional wise line. I realized that justice isn't about fixing the past, it's about fixing the future. We're not fighting for the dead, we're fighting for the living. In my vlog on A Memory of Light, the final book in the Wheel of Time series, I expressed my distaste for an overdose on war. Well, Morning Star is practically 90% war. So much even that I genuinely considered DNFing the book. But the story itself kept me going and kept me entertaining. Another strange thing, not really a flaw, but more some sort of oversight, is how a pink, whose interference during a war scene is pivotal, is merely mentioned once in the passing. She's a game changer, but remains anonymous and obviously unimportant. And then there's another great powerful scene that got me to the edge of my reading seat. In other words, this book threw me from almost DNFing to loving it to bits within a matter of 10 or 20 pages numerous times during my read. At page 452 I got so mad that I wanted to throw the book away. At that point, the umpteenth betrayal seemed to be setting the whole story back to its beginning. That's what the author probably tried to accomplish, because without wanting to spoil anything, this is the major twist in the story that I did not see coming. All for the better. This hidden plan makes up for a lot of irritation. So, in conclusion, Morning Star is a page-turner. It is a well-written, fascinating story with interesting characters, including the bad guys, and meticulous world-building. But way too much war, violence, politics, which in the end doesn't really interest me. In the background of this all is the realization of what it is really about, namely, to be able to live in peace, to be able to pursue happiness. The minuscule wisdom and prose fireworks do not really save the book. Morning Star also received 84 points out of 100 from me. I experienced these almost contradicting emotions with all three books in the series. Happy to have read them, for sure, but I suppose it'll be some time before I pick up the sequels, Iron Guard, Dark Age, Lightbringer, and the forthcoming Red Guard. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.